Please call this meeting to order at 6:06 p.m. Start with the flag salute. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to item 4, the land acknowledgement. Sorry, I'm gonna get emotional. We passed this and that's my last meeting. Okay. Okay, I'm Irish. I can do this. The Sitka School Board acknowledges that our schools are located on the ancestral homelands of the Tlingit people who have lived in Sitka since time immemorial. I really am thankful. We express our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Tlingit, for their enduring care and protection of Tlingit Bonnie. Dawn, roll call.
Felix Myers.
Here.
Melanie Board.
Here.
Todd Gebler.
Here.
Danny Snyder.
Here.
Tristan Gavon is absent and excused. Oh, Blossom Olson. Sorry.
Present.
The meeting is quorate.
Thank you. May I get a motion to approve the proposed agenda and consent agenda as presented?
I move to approve the proposed agenda and consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed agenda and consent agenda as presented. A roll call vote is required. Dawn?
Felix Myers.
Yes.
Melanie Board.
Yes.
Todd Gebler.
Yes.
Danny Snyder.
Yes.
Blossom Olson.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Moving on to, let's see, is it 6B?
7.
7. I always. Moving on to item 7, persons to be heard on or off the agenda. Persons to be heard is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the board about topics on the agenda or off the agenda. For non-agenda items, no board deliberation or action will occur in response. Questions for clarification may be posed by board members. The board may choose to refer items to the superintendent or designate for further action. The standard time limit for comments will be 3 minutes unless otherwise stated by the board president with the consent of the board. A timer is used and a sound will indicate when time expires. All comments must be respectful and charges or complaints against specific employees are not permitted per Alaska state statute. Members of the public are referred to board policies 1312, 1312.1, 1312.2, 1312.3, and associated administrative regulations, as well as Board Bylaw 9323A for information about how to lodge complaints. Speakers are also asked to please state their full name for the record prior to speaking. Are there any persons to be heard this evening for items on or off the agenda? Welcome and thank you for joining us on this beautiful day.
Good evening. My name is Mike Vieira. I'm currently serving as the president of SEA. And just wanted to take a chance to say here in the middle of June that it's been a year, and we wanted to express our appreciation for you as a board and the work that you've done this year. It has not been without challenge for you guys, and we recognize that. We started with some conflict between our two association and the district, and I appreciate the fact that we maintained professional relationships through that, and we maintained a good relationship with you as a board and with the district, even as we went through some disagreements on some things. So we appreciate that. We sat here a year ago, and Blossom and Todd were the only faces that were here, and so this board has turned over quite a bit. You've had to replace members, and you had to do an interim superintendent search. It's a big lift for a board to do what you did this year, and so we recognize that work, and we want to thank you guys for that. Ms. Teal Olson, I just want to express appreciation for your leadership this year and your voice over the last 3 years that you've served on this board. You've always been willing to listen, and you've got a unique voice to the board, and we're going to miss that as you move on, but we understand all the good reasons that you're moving on, and we wish you well, and thank you for your time and your service for us as a district, but really for the students in Sitka. So we want to say thank you for your time and service. And then I have a comment on something on the agenda, but I assume we'll be accepting public comment on each agenda item.
Sure. Yes.
I'll say that for later.
Robert requires.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any other persons to be heard for items on or off the agenda? Going once. Going twice. All right. Moving on to item 8, special reports, government to government. Are there any government to government reports this evening? Glad to right. Is there any other person for government to report, maybe on Zoom? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to item 9, reports and presentations. Especially, I'm very happy this evening to move on to item 9A, Sitka High School Student Council. We have the presentation of the OSAG resolutions. We have the students, and then we get the well-known chairs. Welcome.
So are we presenting
Yes.
those? Great.
Welcome. So I'm just going to let you take it away. I know it was
All of it. I'm Kylie Orlando, and
Yeah, I'm Francis Myers.
and these are the resolutions we wrote at the for the spring conference of OSAD, which is, if anyone doesn't know, the Alaska Association of Student Governments, and we were very proud of these resolutions, and one of them in particular actually got the resolution of the conference, which was, I think, a very good thing.
Good achievement.
Yeah.
Which one would you like? So we made 2 resolutions at the conference. One of them was Resolution 2, and the other one was Resolution 4. Resolution 4 won the resolution of the conference, and I will begin by reading Resolution 2, which was, I'll just begin. So, be it resolved by the Alaska Association of Student Governments that all high schools across the state of Alaska should implement an anonymous phone line that students can call or text so students can voice concerns about any situations or people they may find worrying, including problems with drugs, weapons, mental behaviors, etc. Whereas Sitka High School Student Council believes that an anonymous reporting tip line for the students would help with the increasing issue of drug use and declining mental well-being among our peers, while also creating a safer environment for all students. Whereas anonymity will be forfeited in the case of 1, an active threat, such as threat of suicide, or 2, a malicious false report of threats. Whereas the availability of the tip line will be communicated with students at a minimum quarterly. Whereas the phone number to the tip line will be shared on all school and district websites. Whereas the Alaska Youth Risk Behavior Survey states, quote, the percentage of students attempting suicide during the past year nearly doubled from 10.7% in 2007 to 19.7% in 2019. Whereas 38.1% of Alaskan high schoolers had felt sad or hopeless for more than 2 weeks in 2019, which is an 11.2% increase from 2007. Whereas the University of Michigan reports that among children and teens who commit suicide, 54% had communicated about or engaged in behaviors related to suicide or self-harm. In some cases, multiple friends knew that the attacker was suicidal. Whereas teenagers in Alaska are 25.67% more likely to have used drugs in the last month than the average American teen, whereas more than 1/4 of students in Alaska were bullied at school in the past 12 months, whereas 8.5% of students, of Alaskan students carried a weapon onto school property in the past 30 days, whereas 66% of school shooters tell someone what they plan to do beforehand, and 89% had displayed objectively concerning behaviors that were observed by others before. Whereas Colorado State implemented Safe to Tell, a phone app and website tip line in 2004, allowing callers and app users to remain anonymous. In 2017 to 18, Safe to Tell fielded 2,786 tips about suicide, 1,831 tips about possible drug use, 1,641 tips about bullying, and 692 tips about possible school attacks. Whereas the Safe School Hotline was initiated by Crime Stoppers in February 2004 upon the shooting at John McDone High School and select New Orleans Parish High Schools. Upon the close of 2004 to 2014 school years, Crime Stoppers assisted school officials in solving over 300 campus crimes, including the removal of guns and knives. Whereas just over half of the public middle school and high schools in the U.S. have tip lines, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. Whereas students are more likely to report warning signs of potentially threatening behavior if an anonymous reporting system was available to them. Whereas Sitka High School Student Council believes that if the majority of high schoolers with violent thoughts towards themselves or others tell their peers what they plan to do, and an anonymous tip line increases the chances of students reporting on violent behaviors, then it is within the best interests of the student body to implement an anonymous tip line. Therefore, be it resolved by the Alaska Association of Student Governments. Therefore, be it resolved that the Alaska Association of Student Governments supports the implementation of anonymous tip lines throughout Alaskan high schools. Action statements. If passed by the General Assembly of OSOG, this resolution will be brought before the Sitka School District School Board for their consideration, as well as the House Education Committee and the Senate Education Committee. And during OSOG, this resolution was passed with noted opposition.
And resolution number 4, which I will be reading, is a resolution we wrote we wanted all the student governments of Alaska to be opposed on House Bill 105, which, for people who don't know, is a House bill for parental rights. And I will begin. Be it resolved by the Alaska Association of Student Governments that members of OSOG should be opposed to the implementation of House Bill 105 due to its unethical and discriminatory nature. Whereas House Bill 105 states the policies must include procedures requiring written permission from a parent before the name or pronoun used by a public school to address or refer to that parent's child in person, on school identification, or in school records is changed. Whereas educators must choose between forcibly outing a student's gender identity or sexuality to their parents or facing legal consequences. Whereas transgender people, when compared to cisgender people, report significantly higher family rejection, lower social support, higher loneliness, higher depression, lower protective factors, and higher negative risk factors related to suicidal behavior, and are less certain in avoiding sexual risk behaviors. Whereas in the United States, Alaska ranks number 2 in child abuse cases, whereas Alaska has one of the highest rates of suicide per capita in the country, whereas suicide is the leading cause of death for youth and young adults aged 15 to 24 in Alaska, whereas 82% of transgender individuals have considered killing themselves and 40% have attempted suicide, with suicidality highest among transgender youth compared to all other groups. Whereas a parent has complete access to a student's records unless, quote, a reasonably prudent person would believe that disclosure of the information would result in child abuse or neglect. Whereas there is not a definite way for teachers or anyone else to know whether the information in a student's record could potentially lead to harm. Whereas Sitka High Student Council believes that requiring teachers to forcibly out students to their parents regarding matters of pronoun use and gender identity could lead to disastrous consequences, as transgender youth have significantly higher chances of family rejection and suicide. Whereas House Bill 105 states the program includes written procedures to address the physical safety and privacy of students in locker rooms and restrooms through the separation of students by biological sex, access to single-occupant facilities, or other safety and privacy protocols disregarding the student's gender identity. Whereas House Bill 105 defines gender identity as an internal sense of being male, female, or something else, which may or may not correspond to an individual's sex-assigned birth or sex characteristics. Whereas transgender and gender non-binary teens face greater risk of sexual assault in schools that prevent them from using bathrooms or locker rooms consistent with their gender identity. Whereas a recent study found that 36% of transgender or non-binary students reported being sexually harassed in locker rooms not consistent with their gender identity. Whereas transgender and gender non-binary adolescents experience high rates of peer victimization, whereas because of iterative encounters of surveillance, scrutiny, harassment, and violence, trans people regularly adopt strategies for navigating locker rooms as non-members of that specified biological sex. Whereas House Bill 105 proposes that parents must be given 2 weeks' notice and they must provide written permission before, quote, any activity, class, or program that includes content involving gender identity, human reproduction, or sexual matter is provided to a child. Whereas Bree's law states that dating violence education must be taught in grades 7 to 12 in all Alaskan public schools. It instructs teens how to develop healthy relationships, practice supportive communication skills, recognize the warning signs of an abusive relationships, and where to go for help. Whereas Bree's law includes education on sexual abuse and therefore could fall under any sexual matter proposed by House Bill 105, making it required for parents to give permission in order for their kids to attend these talks. Whereas House Bill 105 and Bree's law are in direct contradiction to one another. Whereas half of all women in Alaska have experienced physical violence, threats of it, or sexual violence from a partner at some point in their lives. Whereas because of Bree's law, within 3 years of Bree's murder, teen dating violence was significantly reduced, nearly in half. Whereas Bree's law education significantly reduces teen violence and sexual misconduct, and House Bill 105 makes it so parents must provide written permission before a class can talk about any sexual matters, then House Bill 105 could potentially get in the way of life-saving information if a parent decides their kids can't participate in these talks. Whereas if this bill passes, it will be enacted July 1st, 2023, before next school year. Whereas Governor Dunleavy recently announced House Bill 105, which on the surface is intended to expand parental rights in education, but what it really does is strip schools of their ability to educate, affirm, and protect trans and gender nonconforming youth who can't safely share their identity with their families. Therefore, be it resolved that the Alaska Association of Student Governments does not support House Bill 105 and its implementation. Action statement. If passed by the General Assembly of OSOG, this resolution will be brought before the House Education Committee, Senate Education Committee, and the House Judiciary Committee for their consideration. Thank you.
Does the board have any comments? Mr. Gedler? Any questions? I just want to take a moment and ask how many hours did it take for you guys to write both resolutions? Because I have experience writing resolutions, and I must say I haven't written any to that extent, so it must be, please do tell.
Well, we worked every day after school, from every other day after school for the few weeks leading up to OSOG. So it took a few.
Yeah, quite a few hours.
And how many people?
Just
us two. We got a little bit of help here and there, but we're the only two who wrote the resolutions.
And then can you give us, for the record and also for people who may not understand, the size of what entails the scope of OSOG? Can you tell how many?
Well, pretty much all the student governments in Alaska are involved in OSOG, and so it was a pretty big deal, and especially for resolution number 4, we were very close to getting it passed.
Unanimously.
Yeah, unanimously.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty big accomplishment for how many schools and people are involved in OSOG.
So when a resolution is able to get passed, that essentially means that the majority of schools across Alaska support the implementation of what you're trying to propose. And so it's good to have them passed. It's nice.
And how many resolutions are passed during this?
Most of them are passed. It depends on the content. For something that's kind of uniform or the only change that would happen is in like their certain school, and if the majority of people in that school say that resolution should be passed, then there's not a lot of contest on that, and there's not a lot of debate of whether that should be passed. So most of the resolutions do end up getting passed at OSOG.
Yeah, and I would say there's probably an average of anywhere from like 15 to 25 resolutions per conference, and I would say if a majority get passed, but there are also a number that do not get passed. So, like, I believe at this last conference there was around like 20-ish, and probably like if there were 20, maybe 15 or so got passed.
Thank you for that information. Is there anything more that you'd like to share with the board?
Is there anything?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you.
Alright. Moving on to item 10, board member reports. I'm going to start with Todd, Mr. Bidler.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'll start off with just kind of going back to the end of the school year and a couple days. Well, it was the last day of school. Had a really great time at Keats. I was painting faces. Had a great time doing that. Really enjoyed it. All that time was really good. Really incredible time doing that. And the last couple days, and then fast forward to the last couple days, maybe 4 or 5 days ago, I had to remember the good times, those times, and just some recent news that we've heard. And I know Superintendent Hauser is going to go over this, but there's been some news reports about the issues with the budget now. It's still digesting with me, and I'm still in the anger phase as far as my emotions go. So there will be more to come. I'm sure Superintendent Hauser is going to talk a little bit about it, but I do like to go back to the end of school, and I do like to remember the good things about being with kids. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Bidler.
Thank you.
Ms. Ward.
So not a lot to report. It's been a nice break. However, I was able to attend the different graduations, junior high, Sitka High, and Pacific High. And I just thoroughly enjoyed being there as a school board member, as part of that excitement and watching the students graduate. So I had a good time, so I appreciate that. That's all I have. Thank you.
I just wanted to second that being part of the Sitka High graduation was the only one I was able to make, but I really appreciated that. No other things to report.
I do want to touch base on the graduation. I think graduation time is always the highlight of this school board's time. I think I've worked with teenagers for close to 10 years, and every time during graduation it was just amazing to see the families come together and to see and to acknowledge the hard work of our students. So it was wonderful to be a part of all the graduations. We're talking about Pacific High and their graduates, and Sitka High School and all of their graduates, as well as Blashley's promotion as well. And so again, it's just a wonderful time to be able to celebrate our families and our students within the district. I was able to speak with Mr. Bradshaw as well, thankfully today, to touch base about moving forward with Mr. Hauser and Mr. Bradshaw's transition from superintendent to interim superintendent, and I was able to also get a very well-rounded update on what was going on with the budget. I had been following the movement of the governor, and we're going to address it. And so, again, was there anything else? I believe that was it. If there was anything else, it will go down in history as never told. So, with that being, Mr. Myers, I can't forget you.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple things to report just about the end of the year and some other things that have been going on. Track and field ended and it was very successful. Our girls took state, our boys were runner-ups, and then also got the sportsmanship awards, so that was really cool. I know our softball, they also were runner-ups for state, so that was really cool. I don't know how the boys placed, I did not ask. But yeah, no, things have been going great with that as well. Just a few days ago, last week, there was the National Speech and Debate Competition, which Sitka High School students attended, and it was very successful. My brother and his debate partner Isabel Schmetzer, Francis Myers and Isabel, they did fantastic. They were in the top 50 public forum debaters in the nation, top 15% of all debaters, so that was pretty incredible. I'm very proud. As well, yeah, everyone just did fantastic. It was a great learning experience. Yeah, and that's not really somewhere that our state champion team has gone before, so it was a really good learning experience for everyone, I think. On the more serious things, yeah, the budget is very frustrating. I've been, yeah, not happy these past couple days because of that. As well, with just to update on some other important policy stuff with the State Board of Education, I'll note that there's a current resolution out for public comment that the State Board is out for 30 days right now about creating separate divisions for biological women assigned female at birth and then everyone else. So they're planning on, there's a 30-day period of public comment on whether or not the regulations should be changed for high school sports to create those divisions instead of allowing trans women to compete in women's sports. And so that's out for public comment. So if anyone in the community, any board member is interested in giving public comment for that, I just want to put that out there that is something that is occurring right now and will create pretty big change to the way Alaska does its activities. Yep, that is occurring right now. That's really all I have to report. Yeah, everyone's enjoying summer, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you're asking Sophia on question. You're asking Sophia on question. Okay. Thank you for that very well-rounded report, Mr. Myers. Thank you for your time on board. Moving on to IBS then. Mr. Kepler, is there any additions?
No, thank you.
All right. Mr. Davon is not in attendance this evening. The record shows that. Moving on to item 11, administrative reports. I'm going to hand that off to Mr. Hauser.
All right, thank you. You guys hear me okay? All right, excellent. Well, just as we go through a couple of, just looking at the first thing on my administrative report, looking at the budget update as we're looking at the June numbers. We are getting ready to close out the end of the year. We still are closing out grants and doing, of course, final payroll and closing out some of the final books, but we still have money in the bank as we're getting towards the end of the school year as far as revenues and expenses go for June. So I'm happy to report that. That's always a good thing. Looking at enrollment, of course, enrollment ended towards the end of the year a little bit lower, but still I think we're going to be within, when we look at our projections, we are going to be within I think a close margin of where we were projecting for next school year, looking at our enrollment numbers. And I'll talk a little bit about some also potential good news when it comes to enrollment for next year in regards to our homeschool program. So I did want to share some of that as well. Kind of tying to the budget, this has kind of come up again. While there's not, I'm sure it'll come up when we talk about the FY23 budget revision and how that might impact FY24 and the recent news of the budget for FY24 and the amount of money that was approved by the legislature, and then the information that came out yesterday about the governor reducing the appropriations for public education funding, that $174 million, which equated to about $680 BSA, one-time equivalent BSA amount for per pupil for the students. That was reduced by 50%. That was news we received yesterday. And so at this point, the money that will be coming to the districts will be the equivalent of one-time BSA increase of $340. Just as I'm sure the board remembers, but just for the public, as we are looking at, kind of next steps. The board did budget for the FY24 with a anticipated increase of $450. And so at this point, the board will be looking at and coming together and having some conversations around what that might mean kind of moving forward. Just again for the board and for the public. That difference of $110 from what was $680 down to $340, and then what the board had anticipated at $450. That $110 equates to approximately $287,000 loss to the district, with the news yesterday. And so that'll be something that the board will be, talking to in the business office. We'll be putting together some of those numbers. Obviously, we weren't able to get those numbers fast enough and turned around in the short amount of time we had for this meeting, but we'll be working on some updates for the board around what those final numbers look like now that we have a budget amount from the state as far as what that's going to look like for a one-time fund in addition to the base student allocation. And so we'll have more conversations about that. And like I said, I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit more when we get to the budget revisions and how some of those budget revisions and some savings we've been able to see for this year might impact that for next year. But I just wanted to give a quick overview of what that looks like for the district and some potential future conversations that the board will be having around the FY24 budget with the a new number that's coming from the state. I'd like to transition in, and I'm actually driving the Zoom, the PowerPoint right now, and so I'm going to try to share my screen so everybody can see my update. It'll look a little bit different, but I just want to make sure everybody can see that okay. Is that coming through? Can everybody see the
Yes.
PowerPoint?
Yes.
Excellent. So just a couple things I want to highlight on the PowerPoint. I talked about this, and I'm really excited to report. And this is actually something that when I first came to the school district, these were conversations I was having with Jamie Eels, who is our REACH coordinator. And that is actually making and transitioning REACH from a local homeschool program servicing the students and families that are choosing to homeschool their students in the Sitka School District to a statewide program. And I'm excited to report that DEED has approved REACH as a statewide homeschool program. One of the benefits is it allows families across Alaska who are looking for a more personalized program to look at the REACH homeschool program and consider it in along with other homeschool programs that are statewide programs like IDEA and Raven Correspondence. It also provides Sitka families who are moving but staying in the state to stay connected to and enrolled in the Sitka School District. We've actually already had some interest in that. We have one student that has signed up, and we have a couple more that are interested in that, and so we're excited to be able to provide that opportunity. So we have at this time 2 statewide enrollments in our Sitka School District Reach Homeschool program, and so that's a nice addition. As well as 7 new to Sitka School District enrollments so far have participated in the Reach Homeschool program. And so, being able to open up our homeschool program to provide homeschool opportunities for students across the state of Alaska, provide the possibility for additional student numbers to come in as we start having conversations about enrollment numbers, being able to potentially have students that are outside of Sitka have access to our homeschool program and be part of the Sitka School District, even though they do not reside in Sitka, is a real benefit, not only I think for the students and the families that choose Sitka and the Reach Homeschool program, because it is an amazing program. Jamie Eels does a fantastic job with supporting our students, supporting our parents, and providing those opportunities for the students. But also I think it opens up some potential opportunities to increase enrollment numbers as well. Just a reminder, when we look at homeschool students, when we consider them for the base student allocation, they only count as 90% of the BSA, but it's still, I think, a positive thing, not only for the families that want to stay connected to the Sitka School District, but also for the potential to provide more opportunities for enrollment numbers to come into the Sitka School District. So very excited to report that. Like I said, it's something we've been working on and wanting to see happen since I've come to the Sitka School District. I just want to have a brief update about the renaming committee for Baranoff Elementary School. I am just about done finding the committee members to be part of that. I'm waiting for confirmation for a couple more committee members, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank the community and all the families and parents and community members that gave feedback and recommendations for the seats for the renaming committee, for the community representative, and also for the tribal elder. I appreciated that feedback and have been reaching out to some of the recommendations, and like I said, getting close to being able to let the board know the names of the the renaming committee, and so we're excited about being able to provide that and start that process moving forward again. Another thing I'm excited to report on, the Sitka School District has notified Department of Education Early Development that we are interested in applying for the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant. They received supplemental funds to support literacy and professional development across the state of Alaska. We are going to be applying our application for that. The deadline is June 30th. We have notified them in May that it's our intent to apply. The state has approximately $10 million that will be available to the state to distribute. The recipients can be awarded anywhere from $25,000 to $500,000. The grant we're looking at applying for will help provide professional development for best practices in literacy instruction with a focus on the science of reading, which is of course important as we are looking at bringing the Alaska Reads Act and implementing the Alaska Reads Act and the supports and requirements to meet that new law that came through and goes into effect. In addition, it will fund personnel to provide both in-school literacy support and after-school tutoring specifically to literacy instruction and support for students. It will help purchase materials and supplemental curriculum to support the science of reading and for our students kindergarten through 3rd grade, but also be able to provide some opportunities for students in 4th and 5th grade as well. And it will also provide a well-structured after-school program that is meeting the needs of students identified as below proficient as outlined in the Alaska Reads Act. And so those are the main focuses that we'll be asking for when we apply for the Comprehensive Literacy Statewide Development Grant at the end of this month. And of course, it's been brought up a lot, graduation was happening in May. And so we're very excited. I just wanted to share a couple pictures of Pacific High School graduation as well as Sitka High School's graduation. I just want to take a moment to congratulate all of our graduates from both Pacific High School and from Sitka High School. They were fantastic events, and we're really proud of the students on their graduation. And of course, it was a great evening, great events taking place, but of course, everybody loves the graduate parade that takes place after the Sitka High School graduation, and I just wanted to share some of those pictures that we were able to have, and it seemed like everybody had a blast, and there were some great decorated vehicles, and it was fun to see everybody celebrated for their accomplishment, and so I just wanted to share that as well. And of course, it was talked about already, but the last day of school had a lot of fun activities. And Mr. Gabler, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you will see the picture of you concentrating and making sure that that face paint was perfect. And I saw some of the artwork, and I've got to say, if you're ever interested in an art position, you might have a second career there because it was pretty impressive. But there were a lot of fun activities that were going on throughout the schools, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the staff and the community for putting it together and supporting our students and making the culminating last day of school a fun event for everyone. We had face painting, we had slushies, we had the Crew Olympics for Pacific High School. They had the big giant blow-up slide, which I got the opportunity to go down, and it was pretty fun. I got to say, if you get the opportunity, you should try it. And then the last thing I just wanted to really highlight when we talk about the last day of school is one of my highlights is on the last day of school, and I've been doing this since I was a teacher 25 years ago, is I always like to go out and just wave goodbye to the students for all the buses to leave. And I always just stand there and watch and wave goodbye to the students because there's just something about, kind of the first day seeing the buses roll up and then the last day waving to all the students when they leave. And I just always enjoy that, and I enjoyed getting a chance to wave goodbye to the students as they were getting ready to start their summer for that last day of school and start summer break. And so those are some fun activities that took place throughout the schools on the last day of school. Just a couple other quick announcements I just want to highlight. Coming up, we have the Boston Middle School Jump Start, which will take place July 24th to August 10th. I can't believe I'm saying it, but just to keep on everybody's radar, teacher's first day is August 15th, and students' first day back in the fall is August 22nd. So, don't need to think about it right now, but I just wanted to make sure that I shared that information. And that's all for my announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser.
Thanks, Mary.
I'm going to back to the agenda. So, is that the official close of your administrative report?
Yes, that is the end of my administrative report.
Okay. Moving on to item 11A, budget update. Mr. Hauser?
Tim just holding all three of us.
12. Yeah, we're on 12A, so FY23 budget.
Goodness.
Sorry.
Okay. Good job. All right, 12. Moving on to item 12, new business. 12A, FY23 budget revision. May I get a motion to approve the FY23 budget revision as presented?
I move to approve the FY23 budget revision as presented.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Any public comment? Welcome. My apologies, it's getting to me.
Good evening. My name is Mike Vieira again, and I am here kind of representing one of our members, Rich Krupa, who serves as the activities director. He's out of the country and unable to be here tonight. We're a little bit concerned about this budget revision and the fact that it doesn't show any direct allocation to student activities. There was a little bit of a difference this year in how that happened. As I recall, the City Assembly awarded the full rural schools amount to the district, with the indication that that would also cover the traditional $132,200 that goes to student activities, but it wasn't directly appropriated in the manner that it was before. So as I understand it, the activities program this year has gone the whole year without receiving any funding for any team or activity group, which, I served 6 years in that role. I don't know how they survived. Credit to Mr. Krupa for getting those teams through the year financially. But they've not received any allocation for the FY23 year. And I think it's important that before we revise this budget and seal up FY23, that we make sure that those groups receive some of that funding. As I understand that Mr. Hauser had indicated to Ms. Lumvik and Mr. Krupa that he had hoped to have that award be more than $132,200 this year, somewhere closer to the $200,000 mark. So I think that we need to make sure that we don't go a full year without funding activities. We've had a lot of talk about this. We know hope is on the horizon for next year, but we can't ignore funding those groups this year, because we'll put them in a hole that they have to crawl out of, and we'll be right back where we were, kind of trying to figure this thing out. So I believe that the assembly members, when they approved that, thought that they were making sure that activities were taken care of as well with that allotment from rural schools. And I hope that we make sure that we do what they thought we were doing, because we're going to be coming back to them for more and more as we go forward, and we want to make sure we're in a good spot with them on that. So I hope that before this budget is revised, that we also have an allotment that goes directly to student activity groups and teams for their expenses for FY23. Thank you.
Is there any other persons? Is there any more public comment? Any board comment?
I was hoping Mr. Hauser could address the second bullet on reallocations. If you could just provide more information on that bullet point. I'm not understanding the differences in the terminology.
Any other board discussion?
I have a question as well about in the Sitka School District on page 5, the expenditure summary by function. I'm curious, in the special education instruction and special education support, that decrease that's happening, where is that money going? I think I already asked this maybe 8 months ago or something about, because there was a budget where this was being decreased and being put somewhere else. Just where is that? Are we still having that special education instruction and support? Because in there it says there's a large decrease to it. I'm just wondering where that's going and what that is.
Mr. Hauser, I'm going to hand this off to you so you can clarify for the board and for the public.
Perfect. And I will go through and try to address that as it's coming through. So I apologize. I'm on Zoom as we're going through this process. So to speak to board member board's question in regards to the reallocation, second bullet, just want to make sure the district has reallocated funding from technology services district-wide function 556 to district-wide regular instruction, district-wide function 100 to cover additional student technology instructional expenses. And what we're in, and I might invite Leslie Young to come up and maybe kind of go into a little more detail on this, because to kind of talk through some of this. But as we're looking at shifting, part of what we were looking at was trying to make sure that we are covering essentially some of that technology services and costing for regular instruction, and trying to making sure that we're getting those expenses kind of represented for kind of what those technology services were from a district-wide. So if we're using technology services that are specifically towards regular instruction, trying to be able to separate them out. And there's a couple other places that we've tried to through this budget revision. Of course, a lot of what you're seeing here is the truing up of the budget as we get towards the end. but trying to, you know, kind of be proactive in trying to separate some of the funding from, you know, what are those generic technology services. Say these are technology services, but they are specifically providing, you know, district-wide regular instruction. So we can start to kind of track some of that use of that funding for the budget. And you'll see that also one of the things that we started to do and will move forward when we start looking at and doing some changes for FY24. Another example is we started pulling out some of the funding that we are breaking out by line, the funding that we have towards our culture department. And so making sure that we can start to reflect more accurately where this money is going for. And so I don't know if Leslie has kind of come up, if she is able to provide a little bit more detail on specifically that bullet. You know,
Leslie is here.
Leslie, want to share a little bit more on that one?
Again, Mr. Hauser did a great job, Leslie, on this matter. Basically, it's looking at the purchases and what are their purpose of the purchase. You know, does it apply to a district-wide programmatic or is it district-wide instruction? So maybe if those purchases were staff computers, that wouldn't necessarily be applied as a instructional, even though they are instructional use. It's again trying to quantify where the technology is being utilized, you know, and representing it again more accurately. And I can say, like say, as we separate the cultural programs out and identifying those kind of purchases, and then looking to again provide more transparency of where these purchases are coming from and where the budget is expected to house those purchases moving forward. So does that kind of answer what you need?
Yeah. The other piece, if I may add to that, one of the reasons why we're looking at, you know, kind of starting to make some of these changes in how the budget's reporting and being able to reflect is because when we have questions about how we're utilizing technology to support student instruction, we don't have to kind of go through and try to, you know, parse through how technology, the overall technology district-wide funding is. We can go through and say, here's what we have allocated towards technology, but we can actually go through and pull reports specifically that will give us a more detailed breakdown of instructional use of technology. Is it being used? How much do we spend on, you know, the costs for our LMS system or Canvas, or how much do we spend on you know, different programs that provide supports for students. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is be able to break it down and in a more granular fashion, line item it out to make sure that we're able to you know, report out a little more accurately of how we're using the money and what specific funds, technology related, are going towards instructional. And so that's what that bullet point was referring to.
Can you touch base on the question Mr. Myers had?
Yeah, and Mr. Martin, would you please, I wasn't able to kind of go through and look at what part were you talking about again? And maybe Ms. Young can address that while I'm going through, but what part were you referring to again? Because there were no reductions in, you know, special ed. It could have just been truing up. If I think what you're talking about, it could have just been truing up of some of the funds that we had at the end of the year that were not utilized and might have been moved to another area of the budget. But just, would you repeat that question so I can make sure that I'm answering?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, it just says on page 5, the expenditure summary by function of the school district for the FY23 budget. Under special education instruction and special education support, 2% decrease and a 6% decrease under those just in that slide. And so that's just what it says there. But I don't know. Yeah.
No, that's great. I appreciate you kind of letting me know when we pull through and you know, kind of look at that. I think what you're probably looking at is some of the costing around. Leslie, can you maybe speak to that a little bit more? I'm kind of pulling it up.
Most of them are like an unfilled position or a position that started mid-year, and so the full budgeted amount of, you know, if we're saying a teacher is 110, we may have only ended up spending 70 on this particular teacher that fulfilled the whole year, and then maybe the rest was provided by a sub. Or again, the position didn't start. We had a couple positions that started late. We also had several para positions that went unfilled. which will then, of course, could be realized in some grant positions as we move positions around. So again, we're just trying to true things up, and as of Saturday, that's where the numbers fell. And as they move forward with other numbers, we'll again continue to look at our grants and see where we can maximize our general fund.
Thank you.
Mr. Hauser, can you clarify the posed question from the public comments about the student activities?
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate it. That was something I wanted to bring up, and I did want to speak about that because that was going to be something that I was going to bring to the board at this meeting, and I wanted the board to consider. What Mr. Vieira said is correct. I think it's important from a historical perspective and also moving forward and understanding that the city has appropriated in the past $132,000 towards student activities, and that's been ongoing for a number of years. Last year, back in I believe it was January 22, the assembly did not approve what has been traditionally $132,000 to go towards student activities, but the motion was made to give essentially all of the secure rural schools money that comes through to the district or to the city to the district up to $500,000, and so. The money was never directly appropriated through the motion to go specifically towards student activities. And so the money, one of the things when we were looking at transferring that money in, because it wasn't appropriated for student services, that request needed to go before the board for that budget revision, essentially to shift that money to go into student activities. I said student services, I apologize, not student activities. The amount of money that we received from Secure Rural Schools, we had budgeted $360,000. We ended up receiving $500,000, so it was an additional $140,000. And you'll actually see that reflected in the revenues line of the budget revision. You'll see that $140,000 is listed as forest receipts, but that's Secure Rural Schools. We received that extra $140,000. And the intent and the goal when that money came through was to put that money, or at least we were looking at potentially $200,000 to put towards student activities to give them the opportunity. And like I said, because it wasn't directly appropriated from the assembly to student activities, and it was in an amount of $200,000, we wanted to bring it before the board to consider if the board wanted to move that $200,000 of that Secure Rural Schools money, or a portion of that, whether it's $132,000, make essentially an amendment to the budget revision that allowed that money to go towards student activity, a certain amount. And that was something I wanted to bring to the board tonight to have a conversation about. Of course, there's kind of the piece that I think is worth the board understanding as they are considering the potential of putting some money back into student activities. The information we received yesterday about the governor reducing by 50% the amount of one-time funding for public education. Again, like I said, the board budgeted for an amount of an anticipated $450 BSA increase. That number has come in at $340, which has a impact of a loss of $287,000 in that one-time fund. And so that money, because if the board remembers when they passed the budget spent the fund balance down to I think just about $10,000. We were able to find some additional funding through the technology rebates that we're able to get $215,000, and that of course is reflected also in the updated revision numbers for revision number 3, or in the revenue numbers for revision number 3. In addition, there were some other additional funding that was coming through as well, so we were able to get with the Secure Rural Schools that extra money that came through. And so as the board is looking at the possibility student activities, or having a discussion about that if it's something that they wanted to do and move forward and recommend to the to the superintendent to make that budget revision and to put student activities money, that $200,000 or a portion of that into that Secure Rural Schools money into student activities. I think it's important for the board to also be aware that, at this time they are looking at a $287,000, reduction in the budget that was passed. And so that's not to say that, if we close out the school year going into the next school year, FY24, it's not to say that the board can't maybe hold off and make whole, if you will, student activities once, they're able to go through and look at the budget and say, okay, because moving forward for FY24, the city has and the assembly has appropriated that $132,000 back in for student activities. And so that money is back in. It was just for this year, FY23. It wasn't specifically added for funding, student activities. And so moving forward in FY24, we will have the $132,000 as well as the money that will come from Proposition 1. And so that is also additional money that will be going to support student activities and providing opportunities for kids. And so those are a couple things that the board needs to think about as they're, kind of trying to decide if they want to move forward and make an amendment to the budget revision to actually move $200,000 or a portion of that money into student activities moving forward. The bills have been covered this year. It's not like they're writing checks that they don't have, and so there was a little bit more spent if you look at the budget, for student activities and looking at kind of what that cost is. There was an increase to the cost for student activities this year, which was covered through the general fund, and so. We want to make sure that they have and are able to provide those opportunities for students to participate in activities and sports. But that's something that I was going to bring up to the board to discuss how they might want to proceed with that funding. And then I could also highlight a couple other things with the budget just to kind of give some ideas that might provide a little more context to kind of help with some of that discussion about that student activities funding if the board wanted to go there. And I think it goes, as we look at that increase in revenue that I talked about, you will see that that E-rate revenue under the revenue budget on page 3 does have an increase of $215,390, and of course Secure Rural Schools was an increase of $140 some $1,000. That money is going essentially into the general fund that will help with the essentially the fund balance going into next year. If you look on page 4 and you look at what the projected fund balance is at the end of FY23, you'll see that where we were at $1.8 million at the last budget revision, that budget revision number 3, which you're looking at and reviewing right now, that fund balance with those two revenue, increases to the revenue have increased what the estimated fund balance will be, and that will be $2,018,000. And so that has gone up a couple $100,000 what that fund balance is based on the additional funding. And so if the board is considering as they're looking at, kind of rough numbers, looking at, the new information that we have now from the states regarding the final amounts that will be coming as one-time public education funds, looking at potentially putting money into student activities, I think it's important to realize that if that $200,000 goes into student activities, that will reduce the fund balance to $1.8 million, which will, and these are kind of rough numbers because we haven't done the final calculation. I think it's just important for the board to know that will, essentially reduce the amount of money that will be able to offset that loss of $287,000 going into FY24 as a result of that reduction of the one-time funds from the state. That's a lot, and there's a lot of pieces, and I wish we had time to kind of mock up a modified FY24 budget, but that will be something that as soon as we can get that put together, we'll be getting that to the board for consideration either towards the end of this week or early next week as the board, kind of deliberates more on making any potential changes to the FY24 budget. Are there any follow-up questions?
Mr. Gebler, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, not at the moment.
Thank you. Ms. Snyder? Ms. Ford? No. I do not as well. Mr. Myers?
I would add that, I've said it before, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for a high school sport. And the importance that our activities, whether it's a sport, whether it's esports, whether it's drama debate, whether it's, it doesn't matter whatever that extracurricular activity is. Data is very clear that students that participate in extracurricular activities and have the access to those extracurricular activities do better in school, and there's a lot of success and supports that come with participating in extracurricular activities. And I do want the board to, if the board does decide to maybe wait to see before allocating that money, I think it's important to know, and what Mr. Vieira said, as well as kind of looking at that support. This would be the first time that the money has not been, kind of put into student activities specifically appropriated, but potentially moving forward, that support is important, and a lot of our families rely on that and benefit from, our students benefit from being able to participate in extracurricular activities and sports.
I do have one question. So looking at the revision of the FY23 budget, from your perspective, has there been, since we last met to now, any significant changes within our costs within our district that is shown here and will affect our ability to provide for our families?
As far as student activities?
As far as the cost as a whole within the district, I've noticed.
So,
go ahead.
No, that's okay. So, as we look at, what we're trying to do with this budget revision is just kind of true everything up as we get ready to go into the end of the school year and make sure that our numbers are balancing out and reflect, kind of what the spending was. And so that is, just really trying to get us to that point where, we are getting prepped for, going into next year. And so, there was a couple of things that I think are really important as we go through that. We are seeing an increase in the fund balance based on this budget revision, not taking into consideration the potential if the board wants to talk about student activities. We are seeing an increase in fund balance. There's a couple of pieces that I think are important to highlight in this budget as we look at, kind of moving forward. The expenditures did go up too, and the cost did go up. There were increases around, especially the energy costs. We did have some significant increases in energy costs. We did save money on fuel costs, but the energy costs did, go up. And so that is something that we'll be looking at, making sure that we reflect moving forward in FY24 as well to address that increase that has come through with some of the energy costs as well. And so that's, as far as meeting all the needs of the district, that budget, the revision, we have met all the needs of the district and provided the supports for the families and staff. And so as we close out the money that's left over, we'll roll into general fund. Right now, the big question, like I said, is, right now with that, student activities fund, if the board wants to, take some action on that, or if they want to wait to see what happens, in early July, once we get a updated FY24 budget with the new amount coming from the state.
Thank you for that. Is there any other questions, comments? Mr. Gebler?
Can you just clarify, the student activities has money in here and it was paid for, but it just wasn't specially allocated? Is that what I'm...
So yeah, there's money in there for student activities that is through the general fund put towards that. Every year Historically, I'd have to go back, but I mean, for as far back as I think probably most people remember, the Assembly has given about $132,000 to the district in special funds to go specifically towards student activity. And that's to help cover the cost of increased travel costs. I mean, with the marine highway system versus, the marine highway system versus flying. I mean, as soon as we lost some of the fast ferries and everything else, the cost for travel in the southeast went up significantly. And so those funds helped offset some of those costs. And of course, all the coaches and the families and the students also did a lot to fundraise to help provide the funds. And so that money was a way to kind of help support some of the travel that happens that's a requirement in the southeast. There's also, we did see an increase amount of money that we put towards, as far as in the general fund, we put towards student activities, and a lot of that was the cost for essentially coaching staff, certified versus non-certified staff. So there's costs associated with that as well. And so, the amount of money that we had budgeted for activities actually went over, and part of this budget revision covers that increased cost.
Thank you.
Any more discussion from the board? It's been moved and seconded to approve the FY23 budget revision as presented. Roll call vote is required.
Melanie Ford,
Yes.
Todd Gebler,
Yes.
Danny Snyder,
Yes.
Blossom Teal Olson,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you, Leslie.
Madam President, if I may, I just add one other thing, and I'll make it quick. And I appreciate the board approving the budget revision. I would like to again advocate for the board to look at, in July when that money comes, when we have a better idea, to potentially look at, supporting student activities and looking at, kind of potentially making it whole when the board has a better understanding of what the implications of the governor's and the budget coming from the state means. And so I just wanted to add that one more, plug to consider that kind of, as the board is looking at that.
Thank you for that note, and I'm sure that the board will move forward, and I'm sure that you will also meet with Mr. Bradshaw as well to make sure a smooth transition on the subject. All right, moving on to item 12B, approval of a year-long pilot for K-1 ELA curriculum. May I get a motion to approve the year-long pilot for K-1 ELA curriculum at a cost of $26,679.60.
How's everyone doing?
Approve program K1 ELA curriculum at a cost of $26,679.60.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the year-long pilot for K-1 ELA curriculum at a cost of $26,679.60. Is there any public comment?
Can I present? Okay.
Oh, public comment before she presents?
Oh, it is a summer day. Please present.
Okay.
I did want to say that,
That's what I'm saying.
Joe's going to present on this, so we got a slideshow, and then,
Yeah.
there might be maybe some comment afterwards, just if there's, this might answer some questions that people might have in the
Yeah,
audience.
people might want to ask some questions afterwards.
Please remind me to put that on your exit to communicate there is a presentation attached.
Fair enough.
I just looked really eager.
No,
Perfect.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for letting me present on this beautiful sunny evening. So this has been a really important journey for our building.
not only because of the Alaska Reads Act, but really more importantly, because all of our kids really deserve the power and the benefit of learning the foundational skills in grades 2 so they can choose the life that they want. And so this is kind of the beginning of that process. Can you move to the next slide? So we all have heard about the Alaska Reads Act and really how overwhelming it is. And if you are unfamiliar with it, here's just a really one-line understanding. The Alaska Reads Act was passed in June of 2022 in hopes of helping all students in the state of Alaska to have access to quality language arts education, ensuring their ability to read at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. That's it. Well, that's a really, really big task because that's what we've been trying to do since education started, right? Well, they put this law in place and said, okay, now everybody do it, right? Well, with that, the whole thing just ended. With that, hold on one second, my whole thing just ended.
If I can move on the fly, so can you.
Do what?
If I can move on the fly, so can you.
Okay. Let's see if I can get it up on here. No, it's my calendar. I don't know. You guys might not get it today. So, well, maybe I can go up here. So with that, they put it together and they said, here's this great thing. Now you guys, we're going to provide professional development. We're going to do this. We want that, and make it happen. Right? Well, that's pretty intimidating. They have the best intent. But the important thing is that all of our products that we use now to teach with have to be based on the science of reading. So when we looked at the products we're using at Baranoff, they currently are not based on the science of reading. The science of reading, it sounds really huge. Well, it is. Now in the last decade or more, we know a lot about how the brain works. And it really is the science of reading. Because of MRI, because of brain imaging, all different things, we know how people learn to read. Compared to 30 years ago, we just kind of guessed and we hoped. We know how people don't learn to read. And so the science of reading is just a framework of explicit instruction, techniques that you use to teach kids to read. And so the materials that we need to use have to be based on the science of reading. That's great. It's what you should use. It's what most states have been using for decades or more. Now the state of Alaska is saying you have to use something based on the science of reading. So really, the science of reading, we all know reading comprehension is the end goal. I can decode Spanish because I've been in the dual immersion program. I can decode it, which means I can say the words. I have no idea what I'm reading. So that means I am not reading, I'm just decoding because I don't have the language comprehension. So really that's the whole ball of wax, right? Okay, next page. So DEED, the Department of Education, came out with a list of the core programs that you can use. When we looked through the core programs at Baranoff, the programs that we're currently using are not on there. And we knew they weren't. And we've known that for a while. Not that there was a list back then, but we've always supplemented with what we knew we had to use. So a core program is what every student gets every day. Okay, so keep going, Frank. I don't have my notes anymore because it just kind of went away. So ELA materials are really, really important. And being, let me pull up my presentation, it's much better. Because for some reason it just like left.
Take your time.
Okay, I will, thank you.
Joe, I don't know if you can see it on the TV, but I was able to bring up your notes on the bottom if that will be helpful.
No, I have new notes because I looked
okay.
through them.
It won't
But,
be.
Your vision might not be that good.
yeah. Mm, I don't know. I'm not sure where it just disappeared to. I'll try this one. Well, I don't know.
Isn't that Apple multi-screen thing?
I don't even know what that means. Did it go to somebody else's thing?
There's like a way that it can.
Great. With the two fingers. Okay, anyways, so when we looked at the list of all the materials that Dee recommended, most of them were very large, comprehensive programs. And what that means is they have the science and the social studies embedded in them. And in kindergarten and first grade, if you want to teach a student to read, you have to use all their books. You have to use the science and the social studies with all of that, their materials. Well, they're not the best because they are not made for the students that live in Sitka. They're not engaging. They're not motivating to them. And they're just not. And so CKLA, one of the programs that we did look at, is a basic framework. It's a skills program. It teaches your kids, our students, how to read, how to write, how to speak, and how to listen with just the skills. But it gives the teachers the space in the room to create meaningful, place-based thematic units that really engage the kids. And for the first time in a long time, all of the teachers, as well as myself, being a former teacher, went, wow, this is phenomenal. We can create really wonderful, meaningful units for our kids and know that they're getting the science of reading, all of the explicit instruction in reading and writing and everything, and they can have fun, which is what we know they have to do. Okay, go to the next page. So this is the why. We want our kids to be engaged because we know that if kindergartners and first graders aren't engaged with what we're teaching, they won't want to learn because it's a lot. To learn to read and write in kindergarten and first grade is a big task. So we have to give them the motivation by making it meaningful for them. So on the next page, let's see what the next page is. Oh, well, no, this is more of the foundational skills. So if you look, here is their lessons. They're very, very simple. Like I said, they're not full of science. They're not full of social studies. And that is the beauty of CKLA because we can partner with the Science Center. We can partner with the Raptor Center. And we can go on field trips. We can do place-based learning with our students, but they get to learn to read and write and all these things really well, which is what we need them to do. Next page. This was one thing that was amazing when I was looking through the teacher's manual. Teaching students how to write in kindergarten, first, and second grade is an overwhelming task. And when I looked through the year of how they teach students to write, it was amazing. The first 2 units, it taught handwriting, and it had them working on building writing fluency. And then it teaches them, once they actually understand how to form letters and write little things, they teach them actually how to write. And the setup is amazing because it scaffolds the students and it mentors the teacher so that they learn how to be a writing teacher. The whole program is set up wonderfully. So, okay, next page. So this is an example of what a really experienced kindergarten teacher can do with a really engaging thematic unit on birds. She partnered with the Raptor Center. She had been teaching her kids how to read and write. And you can see the different levels of her students. Some could write really well. Some were writing a few sentences. And that's what happens. All kids can do different levels. But that's what they can do. But not all teachers can do that. But we do with CKLA, the program gives all the teachers the skills and the abilities to create units like this. Not the science, not the social studies, but the ability to teach your kids how to read and how to write and how to speak and how to listen. Okay, next page. So here's a little video of our kids and what they did with this little thematic unit.
And now and his with
Hi, I'm Mrs. Riggs and I teach kindergarten. This week we combined science, literacy, and art to make our What Do All Birds Have project.
My name's Gavin. I'm in Westwood.
First, students studied birds and learned what makes a bird. Then students created their bird art, making sure their bird had all its important parts. They needed to include a beak, wings, feathers, tail, and feet. Later in the day, students wrote about their artwork. Their ratings included some bird facts, as well as some of their own opinions about their bird. This was an exciting, hands-on project that all students enjoyed participating in.
It was easy and fun.
Okay. So we brought families in. We did a family presentation and talked to them about the Alaska Reads Act, and we presented all the different materials that we had that DEED was recommending, and they overwhelmingly chose CKLA because they liked that it gave educators the room to create meaningful programs for their kids. So in kindergarten, first, and maybe second grade, I don't know, I can't speak to that, but in kindergarten and first grade, typically you do a pilot, you do like a 4-week pilot. Like in the middle of the year, you'll kind of stop teaching your regular program, you'll try a program, and then you'll go back to teaching your regular program. And in kindergarten and first grade, that is just really disruptive, and it will learn their kind of the trajectory of learning. So we would like to use CKLA for a year, and hopefully it'll be the program that we choose to use for a while. So that's my presentation, and I'm really sorry it got lost. I don't know where it went. So what questions do you guys have?
Can you tell me about the committee makeup? Was this mostly teachers, and you said a few families? Can you tell me about the makeup of the committee?
Well, yeah, so this isn't really a committee yet. So there's a formal committee that has been made up of for both schools, because this isn't really a formal adoption. So the committee is, do you know who's on the committee?
As far as for the Alaska Reads Act adoption, that committee?
For the curriculum, yeah, the curriculum committee.
Yeah, I can pull that up. We have, I mean, right now we have, kind of staff identified. But when we look at a curriculum committee and moving forward for an actual adoption, what we do is we go through and we have the curriculum in place, we have the pilots, we look at a couple different options, and of course, There will be community representatives, on the committee for the review and possible adoption. You have staff that are on there that are actually doing the curriculum, usually an administrator. Sometimes you can have a school board member and some other, bring parents in to review the curriculum as well. And parents have sat on curriculum review committees as well as we, are going through and doing an adoption or at least a curriculum review. And then, of course, once that committee comes together, reviews the data from the pilot programs, and looks at the feedback, then the committee says we would like to promote this one program for an official adoption. To go to what Principal Lacrone was talking about, as we were looking at the pilot, because of the age group we were looking at with kindergarten and first grade, developing and having, Nat Geo, which is the ELA curriculum and the supports for some of our other, curriculum that we have at Baranoff Elementary School. One of the things we were looking at is that disruption that would happen for those students in K1, and looking at the ideas if we're moving forward, trying to find a curriculum that we're going to pilot that lines up with some of the what essentially we value is having some of those place-based opportunities and lessons, being able to bring in different opportunities, not overwhelming students with a comprehensive curriculum where we have to teach the science and the social study all put together, but really focus on the foundations of kind of literacy skills and being able to interweave, like I said, like in what Principal Lacrone said, those place-based, instructional opportunities. Going to the Science Center, going to the Raptor Center. And so to minimize that disruption, but also to be able to provide an opportunity for staff as they're going through the training to become endorsed in the science of reading, which all K-3 teachers will need to be endorsed in the science of reading at the end of next school year. What we were looking at, and that's why we got the feedback from the parents and had that kind of curriculum review, kind of the smaller curriculum review together to look at what might be some good options to select for that K1 for a pilot program and to get feedback on that pilot program. Important to note as we're looking at future pilot programs for ELA, Keat is actually going to be going through a pilot program next year as well, and that's kind of part of this for grades 3 through 5, and they will be in January, February, prepping for that and running different, some of the different programs that are on the state's, list as far as endorsed programs. CKLA will be one of those curriculums as well that they'll look at, and then with the district is actually going through the formal adoption process. They will bring that committee together that is made up of Baranoff, Kikushkin, have opportunities for parents to come together, have some district level staff, as well as, to bring them together to be able to have that formal presentation to the board after that review and move forward with a recommendation to the board of what they would like to recommend that the board consider for adoption. And so what you're looking at is a approval to spend the $26,000 to buy the curriculum for K1 CKLA for next year to help with that strategy. But we did want to make sure if we were going to commit that money to that we did get a chance to run it through a review process from the staff like we would a regular adoption process. But we didn't want to go, we're not officially adopting it yet, we're looking at running a year-long program for consistency, and so there weren't some significant changes for students in curriculum at those fundamental years of learning.
So it wasn't a full committee, you had a few teachers and a few families look at this?
The whole staff looked at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You bet. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So with the READS Act, this is really just a process of figuring out what change we're going to make, because we do have to make the change because we have to change to science reading based anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so
We absolutely do.
yeah, and so this is what right now is looking like the best option for what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It was in my notes. It probably would have answered it a little bit better.
No worries. You did.
Yeah. What other questions?
So if we approve this, then you put it in the budget for FY '24. Is that correct, Frank?
So this is actually in the budget for FY24 under curriculum materials, and so this would be the resources are there to be able to purchase this pilot curriculum for FY24 as we were looking at instructional materials, and so this is just because we're looking at spending $26,000, wanting to bring it to the board for that approval process, and so but that money will be able to be there for the curriculum for FY24 already in the budget. So,
Yeah.
and then as we move towards more formal adoption, and the board considers that will have an increased cost, that you'll need to look at the potential for consumables as well, and there will be ongoing annual costs for some of the consumables for the ELA curriculum, and that will be something that will be built into the budget moving forward once a formal adoption of the curriculum has happened and we know what those final costs are going to be. If in the process that there's the desire to stick with CKLA at K1, there would not be a need to buy the materials, just the consumables for that. For 3.5, you would have to buy the materials and then of course the consumables moving forward once that formal adoption happens.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Todd, do you have any? I don't want to leave you out.
Yeah, I was under the impression that this was something that was already in motion. So I apologize for jumping the gun there.
Yeah.
I thought it was,
You and I both.
Yeah.
Reasons to.
my apologies for that.
Thank you. I don't think there's any necessary. All right, after that amazing presentation and all the clarifications and the questions answered, thank you again, Ms. Crone, and for your correction. So going back to item 12B, approval of a year-long pilot for K1 ELA curriculum. After the presentation, is there a motion to approve the year-long pilot for K1 ELA curriculum at a cost of $26,679.60? It was seconded. Is there any public comment? Welcome.
Hi, I have a public comment.
Please state your name.
My name is Sarah Ferenczi, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Cultural Resources, Education, and Employment Department of the Sitka Tribe of Alaska. I have two public comments to make. One is that I don't even remember at this point how I heard about this happening, but I definitely asked the same question that Ms. Board asked, which is, wait a second, what do you mean we're piloting curriculum? Like, when did this go to the parents? When did the community? When did the tribe? Like, who was involved in this committee? And so I would like to just suggest or request in the future that really stakeholders be involved at the ground level. Because when it comes to that formal adoption, and if you've already done pilots, you've already invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, you're really a rubber stamp committee. And we are interested in being partners and being partners from the beginning. So that's one piece of comment. At the same time, I also want to say, I did a little research into this curriculum. I'm excited about it. I talked to Jill about it. It is the perfect vehicle to reach the goals of the SNEP in Schools program, which is the MOA that was included in your packet, which is the idea of building that cultural integration, the place-based education, and the diverse value systems into our curriculum in a way that they can be removed. And connecting with students' schema, with what they already understand and what they already value, is how kids learn. And it's also like connecting with all of the rich resources that we have here and that exist really in the world of children's literature. A tremendous amount of, like, I remember 20 years, well, anyway, I have a 20-year-old, so whatever, 14 years ago when my older kid went to kindergarten, being really dismayed by the materials that were provided for kids to learn to read at that time. That was a long time ago, a lot has changed since then. But I just remember thinking, gosh, if I was a kid who didn't have access to books at home, and I came to school and these were the books I got, I would not get excited about reading. You know, because that's kind of the quality of the materials that come with most sort of packaged reading curriculum. And it's no fault of teachers, you know, it's no fault of the system that was in place at the time. But with a framework like this, you can really hang that explicit instruction on really rich content in a way that the curriculum makers who are designing for Texas and California can't. And so we're excited about this curriculum itself, and I think as much as we would have preferred to be involved at the ground level, the timing is also tricky, you know, because of this push with the Alaska Reads Act. This is the perfect time as we start this SNEP in Schools program, and we have staff at the tribe and staff at the school district dedicated to this project. It's the perfect time to do this pilot. So, so I'm in support of that also. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Any online?
No one online.
Any further discussion before?
No, I appreciate that input, and I would like to see some cultural input prior to a pilot study in the future.
I would have to agree. But I am excited as a person who had an extensive children's book collection and having read an extensive amount of books and had it the base of really my life. I'm excited for our young students and their adventure into reading. I really do hope it sounds from the presentation, and from the evidence that I've read that it is a big step up and a nice warm welcome to the Alaska Reads Act of how we navigate that. So wish you guys the best on that. All right. Any further discussion? Does there need to be a roll call? Yeah. Roll call, please.
Melanie Ward,
Yes.
Todd Gittler,
Yes.
Dana Snyder,
Yes.
Lawson Teal Olson,
Yes.
Felix Myers.
Is it a budget item?
No.
Oh, okay, yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you, Dawn. Moving on to item 12C. Approval of the 2023-24 school board calendar. Is there any comments from you, Mr. Hauser, or any presentations I should know about this before any?
So you just set off my Siri, so sorry about that. The only comment I would say is I just want to take a moment to thank Don Georgia for going through and revamping the calendar kind of look. And what we were trying to do is try to articulate the regular meetings, but also possible work sessions that were, at the time frame in place, as well as some other potential items that come up. And so you'll look as we kind of go through, it's broken up into a little bit different framework than just a list of dates. It actually goes through and talks about possible work sessions and special meetings. And, this is something that the board can continue to add to, when they're going through the school year and as something comes up that they might want to add to it. So I just wanted to take a moment to, one, highlight it's a little bit different format, but it's a format that we're hopeful is more supportive of and kind of outlines, throughout the school year, upcoming items that the board might want to consider.
I do have to remark that when I saw this, I did note like significant change of the previous as to now. I think with how far the board has come and addressing all of our concerns, I think it is a great way of putting the two together, because before it was predominantly a calendar for the public, and somehow, we as a board had our own line of direction, and I want to thank you for your time for that, because I really do appreciate the actual layout of what the actual school year looks like, because you think of a year, you think January through December, and the school year is the same but very different. So we have the same months, very different schedules. So thank you very much for that and for the clarification. My opinion is only good things could come from this, from the following board. So thank you, Don. Yes, can you go over a motion? Yeah.
Do we need a motion?
Yes, let's
Okay.
have a motion first, because we do have structure, and I do want to pay homage to that, even though I am a little bit more relaxed than all of the history of board presidents. Make it a motion to approve the 2023-2024 school board calendar as presented.
I move to approve the 23-24 school board calendar as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the 2023-2024 school board calendar as presented. Any public comment? Any board comment?
Yes, I was wondering if we could add in or amend to add the a work session for the development of the evaluation tool for the superintendent, to get that on the calendar for August. And then also superintendent recruitment. When do we start that, or, yeah, if we can get that on there.
Yeah, we can add those. Superintendent recruitment, since, hopefully it's not, an every year occurrence. That's something that as the board's going through, but I think that would be something that the board will want to start talking about in, October, to start planning, for early, ideally end of November, early December, it's advertised, and, start closing that usually around right after winter break. In January, so we can add those to the calendar. It's not a change to the actual, the board can make an amendment to add those two things, and then we can add those if we want. I think that the one for the superintendent evaluation would be worth adding. I'm not sure if the superintendent hiring practice is one that needs to be added to the formal calendar, though it's one to keep in mind. Well, you guys are going to have that in mind when you're looking at hiring the new superintendent.
Is there a desire to amend the motion?
I move to amend the board calendar to add,
Actually, let's, thinking about it, let's move forward with this and then we amend, correct?
No, she can make an amendment right now, and then that amendment passes, and then the vote to, approve the amended calendar.
I move to amend the calendar to add a work session to develop an evaluation tool for the superintendent annual evaluation. And then also to add the superintendent recruitment to the calendar.
Second.
So for clarity, the board wants to amend the formal school board calendar to reflect the hiring of a superintendent. I'm only stating this because I think that could be a memo, but I do agree with adding on the evaluation tool in August.
I have a question regarding that.
Please.
Frank, maybe you could answer this. If we contract with AASB, they will have a timeline for us, correct?
That is correct. They usually, when you, whether it's ASB or you contract with another, but it also depends on when the timeline usually goes through and they'll look when they're contracted. So let's say we don't find out until January, obviously the contract timeline is going to happen a little bit later in the year. So the goal of the board would be early on contracting what would be the ideal time, and no matter who you contract with, and they will have that timeline in place. The big question is, when do you want to have that conversation with whoever the board is going to contract to hire the superintendent? When do you want that process to start? And I think you could put that on the agenda for next year, because you'll have to approve another agenda. So I mean, that amendment would be perfectly fine, because you'll have to approve another one next year, and you don't necessarily have to include that on there for the board. I think it would be, just to make sure it's memorialized and put in there. So I think it'd be fair to just, okay, in October, we're going to start working with and putting an RFP out for getting a bid of doing a superintendent search and seeing what that looks like. And so I think it's absolutely appropriate to put on there, and I don't know if it's needed, but it's absolutely fine to put on there, and it's appropriate to put on there. Just as a reminder for everyone that it's on our calendar. This is when we're going to start having those conversations. We cannot forget to find a new superintendent. So Steve might have to stay an extra year.
Sandy won't let you forget.
There.
A
There it
very
is.
soft point of order.
That got his attention.
There it is.
All right, so I do support that change. I just totally fine. I just wanted to explore the option that Mr. Hauser put in front of us. So there's a amendment on the floor to amend the current motion to reflect the addition of an evaluation tool in August, and to put when was the superintendent search?
October?
October. Do you have language for that?
I thought you said it, but
Okay, no worries. The amendment, the motion on the floor is make it a second for the amendment.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to amend the current motion on the floor to reflect, let's see, the addition of, oh man, I can feel my 1 foot going out the door. I'm going to grab myself.
Melanie, could you please restate your motion?
yes,
To
I
amend.
move to amend the calendar to add a work session to develop an evaluation tool for the superintendent annual evaluation.
I feel like I'm playing Wordle.
Okay.
All right.
And also
In August?
in August.
In October.
And also to add the recruitment of the new superintendent in October, to start the recruitment.
Is there a second? There was a second, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any opposition? Seeing none, the motion passes.
That's the amendment passes?
Yeah, the amendment passed.
All right.
So do we need to talk more about the thing as a whole? Or do we just?
I passed. Moving on to,
We have to pass the actual amendment motion. Now, we passed the amendment, now we have to pass the amendment motion.
Let's pass the motion.
Well, can I just say something about the general? Thank you. I haven't seen these calendars before, really, but I really liked it because when I looked at joining school board, I heard one meeting a week or one meeting a month, and then I came on and I quickly learned that that was not the case at all. So I feel like this reflects the commitment needed much better. And so I think that is important to sort of really reflect the amount, because this is an intimidating calendar, and I know it's realistic, but I think people need to know all the things that are on it. So, thanks.
And how much time?
I appreciate that comment because the recruitment of a new superintendent are numerous meetings. It's not just one meeting, so.
Yeah, and my thought was that that wasn't even on here, and I was like, oh, yikes.
All right, so the amendment passed. Going back to the motion. May I get a motion on the table is to approve the 2023-2024 school board calendar as amended.
I move to approve the 2023-2024 school calendar as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to approve the 2023-2024 school board calendar as amended. Is there any public comment? Any board comment? Seeing none, the motion passes. Good. All right. And thank you for that catch. Moving on to item 12D. Actually, could I get a motion on the floor for a 5-minute recess?
I'll make a motion for a 5-minute recess.
Is there a second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded for a 5-minute recess. We're coming back in 8:07.
Did you say good night?
No, we just did a 5-minute break.
Okay, thanks.
I'm working on something. I guess we could come out of recess. Meeting is back in session at 8:13 p.m. Thank you guys for that time. Being patient. We are working on something, so thank you. And for your patience. I did one of them. No worries. And thank you, that's big help for me. You think how's that? How's that?
12D, right?
Yes. All right, moving on to item 12D, adoption of BP and AR 114, district-sponsored social media in the first reading. Can I have a motion for this agenda item?
I move to approve adoption of BP and AR 1114 district-sponsored social media in first reading.
Is there a second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve BP and AR 114 district-sponsored social media in the first reading. Is there any public comment? Any board comment? I just want to state and reflect for the record, the policy committee, I want to highlight the amount of dedication and hard work that the policy committee has has committed to these endeavors of updating the policies that we run off of. Policies and procedures are the backbone of why we come together, how we come together, what we can work on, how we can work on things, and ultimately what moves us forward. So when it comes to the policy committee, we have the committee members, but we also have the backbone of Ms. Dawn Georgia, and we've had the great leadership of Mr. Superintendent Hauser. So again, you know, for historical purposes, this was a highlight that Mr. Holtz brought up. He brought up the dates, and we realized what type of timeline we needed to create to work on the policies to make sure that we worked on the ones that needed to be wordsmithed, updated, renewed, and made. So we covered all of those bases, and I couldn't be more proud of the hard work that the committee put in, and all the suggestions of coming together. And we definitely took our time on many of them, and we had many discussions where I finally look back, and there was a lot of time on many different single words, but that's what policy committees are for, because they are so important. Sometimes a word matters, sometimes a phrase matters, updating you know, the social networks, the whole demeanor of our society from 1990s to even 2000s to now has changed drastically. And so, again, without any other words, a lot of hard work has been put into making these changes and having these put on the agenda. So that's my input. All right. The motion on the table is to approve BP and AR 114 district-sponsored social media in the first reading. Is there any opposition? Seeing none, motion passes without opposition. Moving on to item 12E, adoption of BP and AR 3522 District Data Protection Program in the first reading. Is there a motion for this agenda item?
I move to approve adoption of EP and AR 3522 District Data Protection Program in first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve BP and AR 3522 District Data Protection Program in first reading. Is there any public comment? Any board comment? The motion on the table is to approve BP and AR 3522 District Data Protection Program in first reading. Is there any opposition? Mr. Gebler, do you oppose? Any?
No.
Nope. The motion passes without opposition. All right. Moving on to item 12F, adoption of BP 3590. May I get a motion to approve this agenda item?
I move for the adoption of BP 3590 electronic signatures, first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve BP 390 electronic signatures in the first reading. Is there any public comment? Any board comment? Right. The motion on the table is to approve BP 3590 electronic signatures in first reading. Is there any opposition? Seeing none, the motion passes without opposition. All right, moving on to item 12G, adoption of BP 6161.5 website pages in the first reading.
I move to approve adoption of BP 6161.5 website pages, first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the adoption of BP 6161.5 website pages in first reading. There was a second, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Any board comment?
I will say this was one that we spent an awful lot of time on, just because of it was very outdated. A lot of the language, there was a lot of conversation about webmasters and what that is, and talking about the World Wide Web. Yeah, no, I mean, there was a lot of work put into it, a lot of conversations to make this
A lot of translations?
A lot of translations of, okay, what does that word mean? And then I, as the youngest person in the room, getting educated on what these things used to be called. But it's now much more updated, and yes, it is up to the 2020s decade.
And I do have to say for the public that in this instance, I was a historian and clarified with proof that, when I was in high school, my technology homework was to Google something. So I definitely have my stripes when it comes to translating what a webmaster is, even though it sounds magical. It definitely has a purpose, and we had a very full-length discussion on the history of technology. I will walk away with clear thumb, and it's good to hear that as well. All right. It's been moved, let's see. The motion on the table is to approve BP 6161.5 websites pages in the first reading. Is there any opposition? Seeing none, the motion passes without opposition. All right, moving on to item 12H, adoption of BP and AR 6145.22, concussion in student athletes and related exhibits in the first reading. May I get a motion?
I move for the adoption of BP and AR 6145.22, concussion in student athletes and related exhibits, first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve BP and AR 6145.22, concussion in student athletes and related exhibits in the first reading. Is there any public comment?
Hi, my name is Freddie Charbonneau, and I would just like to mention that there is a typo in the last exhibit. It should say guide, it's spelled wrong.
Say that again.
It says B-U-I-D-E, I'm pretty sure it should say guide.
Okay.
Guide to concussions in sports. So I just wanted to say this. But thank you for doing this.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for the public comment. Is there any other public comment? Board comment? Mr. Gebler? I don't want to forget.
No.
you. Okay. The motion on the table is to approve BP, the adoption of BP and AR 6145.22, concussion in student athletes and related exhibits in first reading with the notation of the typo in Parents Guide to Concussions in Sports. You want the record to show it should read ASAA Parents Guide with a G instead of a B. Is there any opposition? Seeing none, the motion passes. Maybe I should look. All right. Thank God. Okay, moving on to item 12I, acceptance of Blossom Teal Olson's resignation from the school board. Can I get a motion to accept President Blossom Teal Olson's resignation from the school board effective June 21st, 2023?
I move to accept Blossom Teal Olson's resignation from the school board.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept President Blossom Teal Olson's resignation from the school board effective June 21st, 2023. Is there any public comment? Is there any board comment?
I just wanted to say that this past year, having the leadership and being able to travel up to Anchorage and getting to be part of those experiences and working with the board and with you, it's been pretty amazing, and you've been a terrific leader, and I thank you a lot for, especially in the policy committee, all the conversations and just everything. So thank you.
I have a comment. I just want to say that you have been a valued team member of the board, and I will miss you and your input, and I appreciate your service to the board, and I understand the time commitment that it took and the time away from your family. So I'm excited for you, and we wish you well.
Thank you. And thank you for that.
Awesome, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, you've always been an incredible reference.
Thank you.
Always approachable with all my questions, always from the very beginning. You and I are the original gangsters here with the couple of cards up. So thank you. Thank you for doing what you do. I appreciate it. You'll be missed.
Thank you.
And we've only had a few meetings together, but I appreciate your work, and I can appreciate what it would take to step down. And I know that that's hard, and I appreciate that you did it, and I hope you feel good about it.
Thank you. And while I don't like pomp and circumstance over anything that I do, and I run away from it, and I run away from a lot of formalities, as you can tell. I really do want to say that the time spent on the board that I have had has been a meaningful one. I definitely set out to be on the school board, and I thank the community of Sitka for believing in me and voting me in to serve this term. It took a lot of time and reflection to make this hard decision, and ultimately the time commitment away from my son, who is going to be a senior this coming year. I just wasn't ready or I felt it necessary to go into the school year with 3 meetings, knowing that energy, instead of going to my son and my children, would be spent going over meeting notes and agendas and creating agendas and creating emails and responding to emails. I definitely have to acknowledge that the timeline of my term of experiencing the hiring of a interim superintendent and then hiring of a superintendent and then experiencing COVID-19 and the mitigations within the whole pandemic and what it caused, then circling back around to finding an interim superintendent and the prospect of going back into finding another superintendent, even though I knew that the term would probably end before we did that. Again, the time commitment and the energy and the brain power, I just didn't feel like I had 100% of my heart. And I do want to officially acknowledge my family and my husband and my children, my daughters, my son. He walked home. He had the right to do that, and in a few minutes I will have the right to do that as well. And I wish the board all the best. And it's been a growing experience to step into this position. I definitely will take away a lot of knowledge, and ultimately I choose my family. And I want to acknowledge all the time that they gave up, and all the meals that they gave up, and thankful for Pizza Express. I'm thankful for Mr. Hauser. I'm thankful for Dawn. I'm thankful for Leslie. I'm thankful for Chris, and everyone who, the previous board as well, who, came together and set out on various different prospects, and we got to see things done. So I'm very proud of the work that we did. I'm very excited for the school district, and I feel like we accomplished a lot during my term, and I am more excited to see what is to come. I do want to say I'm very well aware of my ability to talk because I am a writer, but I do want to say for the educators out there and for the students out there, as an educator, if you may have a student who has a hard time focusing or turning in their homework or being compatible with your line of thought, have hope, because someday you may find them on the other side of the school board, and I hope that you do. And my word to all the students out there is you don't need to be valedictorian, salutatorian. You don't need to accomplish any high degree of Western ideology of success, even though that I do have to say it does help you a whole lot in life, and I do not, do your own thing, but also be yourself, be authentic. I myself, as you could tell, have overcome just my shyness and ability to breathe while people are looking at me. And with that being said, I thank you, and I'm walking away with a big smile on my face. And the only person I may answer to is Steve. Steve, if you have, I don't even know if he's here, but if, see. If he reaches out, I think he might be the only person I want to. With all due respect, I am going to go home after tonight and start recouping. So, thank you guys, and with that being said, let's go back to item 12I, acceptance of Austin Olson's resignation from the school board. It's been moved and seconded to approve the resignation of President Till Olson's resignation effective June 21st, 2023. Is there any opposition? The motion passes without opposition. All right, moving on to future agenda items. Item 13, future agenda items, upcoming events. 13A, August 9th, 2023. The next regular school board meeting will be at 6 p.m. Harrigan Centennial Hall. I have a quick question. Mr. Hauser, do you have any input for the board? I know that we addressed many different subjects tonight that needed to be addressed before this date. I know that we should have amended in hindsight, we should have amended the proposed consent agenda as presented, but what are your thoughts on this date, and how can the board go about adding a special meeting?
What we'll do is, we just got the information yesterday, so what Leslie and I will work to try to update the budget with the new number, try to go through and give the board an idea of kind of where things stand with an updated budget number, and then we'll present that to the board. So we got to work with her. We're trying to close out this school year, so I think probably within the next couple of weeks, maybe early July, have a special meeting to review the FY24 budget, and we'll try to get that to the board for, kind of prior to that meeting. And so I'll have Dawn send an email to the board looking to find some dates to have that special meeting for the, just to kind of review and essentially make an amendment to, or a revision to the FY24 budget, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I've been in the same solid needed time. So thank you for that clarification. Board, do you feel confident that that could happen? I didn't want to move ahead without that clarification and that kind of pinpoint for realistically what is needed for the board to move ahead. All right, thank you for that clarification. So again, item 13A, as of right now, August 9th will be the next regular school board meeting, 6 p.m. at Harrigan Centennial Hall. Moving on to item 14, adjournment. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Meeting adjourns at 8:39 p.m.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Frank.
Is that the end?
All right.
It's over.
Thank you for staying.
Thank you, Blossom.